Carl, you've been a prison chaplain for 10 years now.
That's correct.
How did you start to collect these writings?
I think the word that would best describe it is frustration.
Frustration, why?
Can you imagine what it means to spend almost 8 years securing an education for the Christian ministry and then be placed in a situation where the words that you speak are not understood, the thought patterns that you use are totally rejected because they have no meaning, but worse than that, the frustration grew because people in jail or prison would talk to me and use words that I didn't understand either, because my experiences, my frames of reference were completely foreign to them. For instance, I tell you a quick story of what really started it was I was on a path with a boy at a camp we have in the summer for delinquent kids, and he asked me what God was like. And I was pretty naive then, and I gave the usual answer: God is like a father. And you could almost feel the intensity of the hatred of the boy when he said, yeah, if he's anything like my old man, I'd sure hate him. It was after that that I discovered that this boy had watched his father murder his mother with a butcher knife, stabbing his mother no less than 18 times. And yet I'm supposed to say to him that God is like a father? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, then how did you make the change? Because the kids can't have accepted you very easily, and they must have thought, here's another God-botherer coming in with all the old spouting, as you've just said.
Well, they most certainly did not accept me very easily, nor do they now. Usually the image that people in the jail and the children's detention home have of me is a phony. And I wished I could tell you that it was as glamorous as it's made out to be in some movies to be a prison chaplain. But the usual reaction is, who the hell is that jerk? And that's where you start, you see. And until a person can see himself and accept himself as a phony, and not be threatened by it, he just isn't going very far.
No, but how do you actually make children delinquent kids? They must be tough kids to be even there. They must have done something wrong. How do you make them actually sit down and tell Bible stories and speak the Psalms in their own words?
Well, I don't make them. That ought to be understood. Can you imagine what would happen?
How do you make them want to?
Yeah, if I were to go into the children's detention home and say, come on, we're going to sit down and tell Bible stories now, they'd promptly tell me where to go in no uncertain terms. So it sort of has to arise in a natural situation. The 23rd Psalm that you've just read a portion from, I was discussing some things with a boy. He was quite convinced. By the way, he was 12 years old. He was quite convinced there wasn't anybody in the whole world that cared about him. You see, his father was a narcotic addict, and his mother was what we call a wino, an alcoholic. And he was convinced there just wasn't anybody, to use his terminology, that gave a damn for him. Well, we tried to find people like the school teacher, but she didn't care either, until finally we hit upon the idea that his probation officer did check up on him with great regularity, and he did care about it, you see. So then we were able to make a relationship to something that had an image to him. And in the course of our discussion, I brought up the idea that God cares. Well, that's hard for him to understand, you see.
You make it all sound very easy, but did you have to change any of the words in these books before they could be published?
Oh, yes. There were several words which would probably be quite inappropriate for me to use on this program or any other, for that matter. And I hope I'm not creating the impression that it's very easy.
No,
It is not, because, you see, for every story of success that I can tell you 12 to 15 of just plain heartbreaking failure. You see, and it's a wrong impression, you see, for me to say that I've found the answer. I haven't.
Well, you're certainly trying to find an answer. You must have lots of favorites within these three books. What's one of your favorites?
Well, one of my favorites is a little bit of poetry that a boy wrote in Treat Me Cool, Lord. It was a prayer, and it went like this. My dad's a drunk, God. Everybody laughs at him. Why do they do that when it ain't funny at all? Now, I think that's a real prayer. It expresses the embarrassment that this little boy has suffered. And if you can imagine that maybe some of the people who have been laughing at his father are related to churches, you can understand why this little boy would turn churches and church people off.
But do you manage to find answers for pleas like that?
Not really, you see. What I try to find is acceptance. I'm scared to death, by the way, of people who have answers. For some of the kids that I come in contact with, there just isn't an answer. And the only thing I can do is to help them to accept the situation that they are in. In fact, I'm mighty suspicious of people who have the answers, particularly the easy answers that so many of my fellow Christian ministers put forth by the quoting of some theological cliche. In fact, the only people that I know of that have the answers never walk the galleries of a jail or sit down with kids in a detention home. I don't have the answers, and I know it.
How much approval does this unconventional way of teaching Christianity, of making them realize about Christianity in the kids' detention center, how much approval and support do you get from the church?
Well, surprisingly enough, I expected, well, frankly, that all hell would break loose, and I would be accused of destroying the beauty of the Bible, and I have been by a few people. But it really has been astonishing to me, the acceptance of this method, the letters that I get from all over the world.
You get them from all over the world?
I had a letter from a young man in Rugby Prison here in England that came just a few weeks ago, expressing thanks for the books. He said for the first time in his life, he was at least beginning to get some understanding of the meaning of Bible stories. They come from New Zealand and Australia as well as the United States.
Carl Burke, thank you.